Welcome to another episode of the Cover 3 podcast, the only college football podcast with a former host working as a general manager for a Power 5 program and a current host imprisoned for a crime he did not commit. I'm Tom Fornelli. He's Bud Elliott. Danny Cannell is not here today because he's visiting Chip Patterson in prison, and maybe he's even smuggling in some contraband. Who knows? We've got a lot to talk about on today's show as the college football world continues to be torn apart at the seams. We will talk about the budding war between the NCAA and boosters, the idea of transfer windows. The Big Ten is about to be stinking rich, and we'll also talk about some Jag pluses and plenty more. But before we get to any of that, we humbly ask that if you are watching us live on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel at youtube.com/cover3. It helps rig the algorithm to make sure that our propaganda is the propaganda being spread across the internet more than anybody else's. If you're listening the old-fashioned way on audio, please rate and subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. Also, tomorrow we are doing a mailbag episode, and we can't have a mailbag episode without questions. So the best way to get your question asked and answered on the show is to leave a 5-star review with your question in the review, or you can just direct message me on Twitter. That worked for a couple people last week, honestly. So, if the question's good enough and it's in direct message, I'll skirt the rules a little bit. I'll get the question on the show. So, it'll help us kill time if we need it. Anyway, now that that's all out of the way, Bud, I absolutely 100% positively have to know what you think about Ryan Tannehill's comments about mentoring Malik Willis, because my God, everybody has an opinion on it.
The NFL is just so undefeated at staying in the news, even if it's just complete nonsense. It's is Jordan a Titans fan? I see producer Jordan in the chat.
Jordan wants
huge Titans fan. Okay,
he's hurting. He's hurting because there's a war. The Titans are being torn apart because Ryan Tannehill will not mentor Malik Willis, and that's one of those stories. I don't want to spend much time on it, but that's like one of those things where I feel like, depending on who you follow on Twitter, like I saw 1,000 people defending Ryan Tannehill. I didn't see any tweets saying what he said was wrong. So I feel like it's one of those stories where everybody's just arguing against nobody, but maybe there were people I don't follow who were doing it. Anyways.
Yeah. It seemed like it was much more one-sided than the soft debate I was having last night with Pitt fans.
So. Oh yeah, Pitt. I talked about this with Danny on Monday. Like, it is so. I'm already tired of it, like the debate and the discourse and all this stuff, which is great because we're gonna have a whole show about it for the most part. But like, I think it's great that USC fans are so mad because it's important for USC fans to be invested in the sport because it means the program is going in the right direction, and that's good for the sport in general. And I think it's good for Pitt fans to be mad about it too, because it's also natural to expect that it's going to happen. But like, because you were talking about on Twitter with some Pitt fans, it's like you didn't mind when you took Akron's leading receiver. So now that somebody's taking your leading receiver, it's like, what are we going to do? I mean, and I know like Pitt fans are going to say it's different situations. He was in the portal. There was no, yeah, I get it, but it's just the way it's going to work now.
Do you think? All right, so I think this whole like, one's an inducement, one's not. Like, isn't Pitt having a good an offense you'd want to play in as a receiver as opposed to Akron? Isn't that an inducement?
Yes.
I mean, like, could you say that Pitt maybe not actively induced, but maybe just passively induced Mumfield to jump in the portal because he wanted to go to a better situation? Look, also, nobody was claiming that Nebraska tampered with Mark Whipple. Nobody said that Texas tampered with Brennan Marion, the offensive coordinator and receiver coach, respectively, who left off that Pitt offense. And those guys got huge paydays, in part due to Jordan Addison. And I just keep the same energy,
Yeah, I think, like, honestly, it's one of those things where it's just we talked about it with Danny a little on Monday, like the brazen nature of it, where it's like you're negotiating publicly pretty much. Like the fact that the news was out there that, Jordan Addison is talking to you, or not talking to USC, but there's interest in transferring to USC and maybe other places, all this stuff happening before it's in the portal. And we've seen it too. Like, I feel like college basketball kind of stepped it up. Or honestly, I I don't think college basketball has changed at all. Like, I feel like this is what college basketball recruiting has been for a while. It's just now you're able to actually say it out loud, because I feel like it's always been this way with like the shoe companies and all that stuff. But I think for college football fans, we're still somewhat more in the dark, who maybe don't follow basketball recruiting as well. It's still kind of like being hit in the face with a frying pan just because you're not expecting it. And some of the people who were apparently hit in the face by this frying pan are the NCAA, because Sports Illustrated's Ross Dellinger reported yesterday that the headline from SI.com: task force to big money boosters, NIL sanctions could be coming. I'll read from the first couple paragraphs here. College leaders are gearing up to issue a warning to hundreds of wealthy boosters who are using name, image, and likeness ventures to involve themselves in recruiting. University administrators, part of a task force to review NIL, are finalizing additional guidelines that are expected to clarify that boosters and booster-led collectives are prohibited from involvement in recruiting. The guidelines will provide more guidance to member schools on what many administrators say are, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, essentially, now that it's already way too late, the NCAA is looking at the situation and saying, we should probably do something about this.
Is this like the NCAA's lawyers just trying to find ways to get more billable hours? Or what is, are these guys just that greedy that they're all right, we got to set another record for billing this month, trying to make partner.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anything will come of this.
No.
I think we will probably have one transformation of the sport and then another before anything actually seriously goes down. Ultimately, I do think we are going to go to a situation where the players have some almost certainly very weak union, and the schools collectively bargain with them and probably win. The schools, meaning, like, I think the schools will reclaim some power within that structure, but right now they just don't want to share any of the money they actually make. So we have this NIL stuff. And who won the national title in basketball this year?
Kansas.
Didn't they have it? Like, is that investigation still ongoing there? I don't follow basketball that much. Okay.
They are working very hard at finding out who did this, and they will be punished to the fullest extent of their non-existent rules.
And Arizona State still employing Herm Edwards?
They are, but they are working very hard to find out who did this, and they will be
investigations ongoing still.
Yes.
Yeah. What if Jordan could slip that little clip of Cam Newton in from the doc? Remember that? As they say,
it's an ongoing investigation. But I just think you're right, because this is like the NCAA. We've talked about it the last few weeks, but like, this is a train that has been coming forever, and the NCAA had plenty of time to prepare for themselves for it, and they didn't do it. They waited until the Supreme Court just gave them absolutely no choice in the matter, forced their hand, forced things to happen. And now that then they just do it. Like, all right, flip the switch. Everything's open. Everything's cool. Do what you want. And then they're like, wow, I can't believe everybody's just running wild, even though we did nothing to prepare for it. We should do something about this. Like, it's like the old Simpsons episode.
Yes. Area Code Camp.
No, the one where Ned Flanders loses his mind.
Okay.
And
yes.
And it's a flashback to his parents taking him to, like, his parents are beatniks, and they take him to like a counselor, and his mom just goes, "We've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas."
I was thinking, God, I love you watch The Simpsons, man. So I was thinking, remember when they changed area codes for Springfield, and Homer is like losing his mind, he's like rolling around the floor like he's having a breakdown. He's like, there was no warning. And then Lenny's like, well, what about when they engraved the new area code into Mount Springfield, and all the lights off in the sky and the skywriting and those billboards? And then Lisa's like, what about the 2 weeks we spent at new area code camp? Homer's like, no warning.
Yeah, no,
that's a great episode.
It's pretty much exactly what this is, because and like, the NCAA has no power anymore. And that's really the truth of it. Like we talked about with Mark Emmert's decision to step down, that's really what's happening here. Is I feel like we are seeing the NCAA is kind of like dying gasps before something else takes over, whether it's the college football playoff or some new collective of the main conferences who just kind of take over, split away, whatever, the autonomous five, whatever they want to call themselves. I think that we're very much heading in that direction, and that when there is any kind of legislation, although I guess I use that term loosely, when there is any kind of rules or guidelines set for what NIL is, for what pay for play is, and will continue to be, because that's the other thing too. We keep calling it NIL. It's pay for play most of the time. Some of these kids are selling t-shirts, sure, but most of them are just, you're paid to be here. There's really nothing you have to do besides be here and play football. So there's going to be guidelines. It's not going to be the NCAA doing it, but at least now the NCAA could say, hey, we're trying. And I think that's really the entire purpose of the whole thing. Some other changes actually that could come up, could happen, that might actually have an impact on things that matter to coaches right now. This is from ESPN, first reported this, Adam Rittenberg and Heather Dinich. Their headline, College Football Coaches Association to propose transfer windows. So college football is going to become like soccer, just not in the way I want it to. But here's from their story. College football coaches will propose transfer windows in the late fall and spring to help with roster management around the transfer portal. Todd Berry, the executive director of the AFCA, said Tuesday his group would like 2 transfer windows for players to enter their names in the portal. One from the final Sunday in November until the early signing date in mid-December, and another from April 15th to May 1st. Both windows would coincide with contact periods in recruiting. Players wouldn't be required to transfer, only to enter the portal during the designated time period. I could see, I think that we're going to have this, but you tweeted a little bit about this yesterday too. I think the 2-week window in spring is not going to fly with some schools.
Yeah, so this is a story that I anticipated when I went to AFCA, the coaching convention, and I'm credit to Heather and Adam obviously for reporting this that they're going to vote on it. It's going to come. Almost all the coaches I know definitely do want this. They do not want to have to continually re-recruit their roster during the season. If I was coaching college football, I would want this.
Yes,
I definitely would not want guys quitting the team in mid-season because you really can't go anywhere else during the season. So you might as well, unless you're in a really toxic situation, just tough it out and then transfer once the season is pretty much over, which is what this transfer window would set up. So for the fall window, I agree. However, for the spring window, I really think that that's going to be kind of problematic on the player personnel side. And I don't have any coaches pushing back to me on this, but I do have guys who work in player personnel, especially at the G5 level. And they are saying, yeah, 2 weeks is not enough time for us to evaluate all these guys. Like we don't have the same size staff that a Georgia or, USC or Alabama have. We are the staff. It's 2 guys here. Right. And if 700 kids go into the portal Monday and Tuesday of that period, we're not going to be able to look at all that film and evaluate those kids and do our due diligence on the backstory. But we can knock out 30 kids a week at the current rate. So I think basically the transfer window should be essentially like Thanksgiving to a couple weeks after Easter, and then I don't like the idea of transferring mid-season. And I do like the idea of having some roster finality over the summer. Like, I don't think we want to have kids transferring in August and being eligible. We have that here in the state of Florida at the high school level, and it's just kind of insanity. But yeah, I think that this is probably going to pass, and my buddies in player personnel are just going to be like, shit, this is going to suck.
Yeah. And that's like getting to that. Like, I think like for the health of the sport, you have to have transfer windows or one larger transfer window, but it does need to accommodate more staffs, like you said, like the G5 schools that might not have 20 guys who are able to pour over the portal and pour over film and like study these guys, because just for the health, like you talk about it, like if you're a college coach right now, you don't really have time off. Like it is a year-round nonstop kind of thing with recruiting, with transfers, because now you're not just recruiting players to come to your school from high school or from elsewhere. You've got to keep recruiting your own players to make sure that they're happy and they're still there. And you have to do all of this while still maintaining, a football team, preparing it to play games and win games so you could keep your job. And there's always the retort, well, that's what, they're paid for. And they are paid handsomely. A lot of them are, especially at the Power 5 level. And not saying that that's not the case, but there's also, they can get paid handsomely at the NFL level, where there's a lot less of that work. So you would see like the top coaches that are maybe attractive to NFL gigs, you might see, like we've talked about, like Lincoln Riley had been a candidate for NFL jobs. Ryan Day's name gets tossed up for NFL jobs. These are very good college coaches who are good for the sport, who, if they kind of grow tired of this kind of thing where they're constantly having to do all this recruiting and the transfers, maybe they just say at some point, screw it, I'm going to take the NFL job. That way I could just coach football. Yeah. And then you could see some of your best coaches leave. Now, you could say that opens up a vacuum for more coaches to come into the college game and develop and improve themselves. But I think that for the sport as a whole, these are guys you want to keep. So you kind of want to make sure that you're making their jobs as easy as possible, or at least more comfortable, so that way they can deal with it and not burn out as quickly as they might.
There's also an element of fandom here that we do have to keep in mind. And I think some fans are turned off by the NIL transfer portal combo.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to go anytime soon. I think maybe take a couple of years, and then I think some changes will likely come. But I'll use an analogy here. I'm a Rays fan in baseball. Tom's a White Sox fan. Our teams don't spend the most money. His team spends more than my team does. And I'm comfortable with the idea that eventually we are going to lose guys to the Yankees when their contracts are up. But at least they have contracts and some roster certainty entering the season. Like, I'm not worried that Wander Franco is all of a sudden going to be on the Yankees a week before, I get season tickets, which I live in Orlando, so I did not get season tickets to the Rays, even though we're technically in the blackout zone, which is insane. That's a different conversation. So I do think having some roster finality entering the season is important. I think it's an important concept of fandom. This might help achieve some of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a process that's a mess that could use as much streamlining as possible. Even
do you think we will have, do you think this will get challenged in court as sort of, restriction on athlete movement and freedom? It's essentially, you're putting non-compete windows on people that you're claiming are not employees. That's the other thing I've heard about this, but I don't really know how strong that pushback's going to be.
I don't know. I think that could be, if somebody really gets a bug up their ass about it, you could do it. But if you find somebody caring enough to do it. But that's the thing, like, what court is really going to, I don't know, like, how long would that take to get to the Supreme Court? Like, think about what,
a long time.
Yeah, think about how long it took for what happened to happen. It's like, if somebody starts filing that, it's just going to keep getting passed along and along and along and along. And then 20 years from now, whoever's on the Supreme Court will listen to it and be like, yeah, no, you have to do it. And the NCAA will be like, what? Nobody told us this. Anyway.
Look at Tom hit all the SEO words today. Supreme Court, Supreme Court, Supreme Court. Come on, Google Smart Speaker, pick us up.
The players should be pro-choice. So another story is from CBS Sports. Dennis Dodd kind of broke this yesterday. Other outlets have picked it up since. But the headline is, Big Ten going to be stinking rich? No, the headline is, Big Ten aims to have new media rights deal worth up to $1 billion with a B dollars in place around Memorial Day. Like, we've known that the TV deal was coming, but what Dodd is essentially reporting is that Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren expects to have an agreement in place on a new media rights deal for the conference in about 1 month's time. The new deal, which would begin in 2023, could be worth a record-setting $1 billion per season, according to the Sports Business Journal. And that means, do the math in your head, per school, if it's $1 billion a year, $71 million per school. That is a lot of money to buy players from other conferences with.
Oh boy, yeah, that is a great deal for the Big Ten. They've always timed this up pretty well. Do you remember when Jim Delaney, by the way, basically said that the Big Ten, the old commissioner of the Big Ten, that the Big Ten would go and become like D2 or D3 when the cost of attendance thing was happening?
Yes.
Yeah,
Jim Delaney had a lot of very brilliant and smart and, turns out, accurate takes about the future of the sport with the way he negotiated these TV deals and did things for the Big Ten. But he also put up a couple stinkers like that.
He was a straight gangster. I mean, like he's literally like the NCAA type OG as far as, like, players are going to get nothing. We're going to just, drag our feet. We are going to get stinking rich as far as schools and administrators and coaches. Like Jim Delaney was very like Roger Goodell. Like, it's like, guess what? I'm going to take all the heat. We're going to make all the money. I'm going to be a villain, but I'm going to be a rich villain. And Yeah.
I don't think anybody. I mean, I feel like the only thing that he ever really did to tick off Big Ten fans was at Rutgers and Maryland, and even that's died down eventually.
And even that made sense because the Big Ten was so out in front with their network-specific TV deal that adding markets actually paid off, I think, in terms of getting carriage on traditional cable providers, right? Did Tom freeze
Yeah.
or did I freeze?
I'm here.
Your face on that was tremendous. Like if you were doing it now, you would not add Maryland and Rutgers because it's now actually more about fans and not just the size of the media markets because people are ditching traditional cable at times. But that was still a smart move at the time, you know?
Yeah. No, I hated it just traditionally because it was like, the hell, Maryland and Rutgers in the Big Ten. I don't care about Maryland and Rutgers, and nobody in New York cares about Maryland and Rutgers, but that doesn't matter because the channel will still be on their cable box. And that's, like you said, all the Big Ten really cared about. But I think that
New York's team.
Just like Northwestern is Chicago's Big Ten team.
Yeah.
But I think like the bigger takeaway here too is we talked about this a little bit on Monday when discussing just kind of like the way, like in the NFL draft, how 43% of the players selected in the draft were SEC or Big Ten. And now you've seen the SEC's latest TV deal. Now you're seeing what the Big Ten is probably going to be announcing by the end of the month as far as the money that will be coming into their schools. And then you look at the ACC, you look at the Big 12, and you look at the Pac 12, and you look at their TV deals, and it's like there's already been that gap that's kind of forming, and it's hard to see it closing anytime soon.
Yeah, at least with the traditional models, it doesn't appear they could close anytime soon. I don't think. I am curious. I haven't seen anybody report exactly who this deal will be with. I mean, they're not going to tell me.
No,
but I don't think it's CBS. At least not the billion part.
Educated guess, it's mostly going to be Fox. I don't think Fox wants all of it because that's too much.
Fox has baseball too.
Yeah, it's too much inventory for them to really distribute unless they've got some sort of streaming app coming out that I don't know about.
And they ditched the regionals, remember? Like that became Bally's.
Yeah. Yep. So I just don't see them having space for all the inventory. So I'm guessing it's going to be Fox gets the sweetheart part of the deal where they're going to have like the first choices. And then I'm going to guess that the rest of it's going to be split up in multiple ways. I don't know if it's going to still include ESPN because I feel like part of the Big Ten still wants to be associated on ESPN just to make sure that they're getting talked about on ESPN. Because
I'm curious about this though. Like, and I have friends at ESPN. How much of your ESPN consumption, like compare it now to where it was before? Like, do you watch college football live?
No.
Do you watch game day?
If it's not a live sporting event, I'm not watching it. I don't watch any of ESPN's shows, like pre-games, post-games, talk shows. I don't watch anything on any network that's not just a live sporting event, to be honest.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, I do watch
I watch regular television.
Yeah, I like MLB Tonight on the MLB network, just because it's like live it's like look-ins to live games, kind of bouncing around. It's nice to have on in the background. But I do think that the importance of being talked about on ESPN is less. I think it's lessened now than it was before. Fox has done a good job with Big Noon Saturday and whatever their kickoff show is called. I don't really watch any of these kickoff shows, and I think people are getting their media from other sources now. Like, hey, Cover 3 podcast on YouTube, or whatever show you want. Also, the Big Ten, I think, is too big to ignore. Yes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think the Big 12 needs to at least be somewhat on ESPN. I think ACC, obviously, being on the ACC network, which is ESPN owned, is important. I think the Big 10 could have 0 games on ESPN. Not they will, but I think in theory they could. And ESPN would still have to talk about them. It would just be like they can't ignore it like they did the NHL.
What would be funny is if the Big 10 leaves ESPN altogether, then suddenly is no longer selected for the college football playoff. Nobody would ever see that coming. But ideally, I think Fox is going to carry most of it. But for me, I definitely want CBS to have a piece of it.
Yeah,
just because I think it would be great for the company to replace, since it's losing the SEC in that 3:30 window, to be able to replace that with the Big Ten. I think would be good and good for the conference, good for the company. And if it's good for the company, it's good for us.
I kind of want CBS to get the Big 12 too. I just feel like as gambling becomes a bigger part of this sport, as like look at the Masters at like what we do as a company with the Paramount app, and how you can select any hole you want to watch. I think, in 10 to 20 years, we're going to have literally on-screen gambling, play-to-play available if you want it. And the Big 12, just with the close nature of all those games, that could be tremendously fun. I mean, I'm just trying to think like way in the future things you could buy, like Gertula, go buy some Big 12 rights and get the live betting integration there with the Paramount app with whomever our casino sponsor will be at that time.
Do you think that's that easy if I just email him after the show, be like, hey, get the Big 10 for the window in the afternoon and get the Big 12? Do it. Make it happen.
I'm going to text Port and be like, hey, your meeting with Jeff is bumped. Let's
go. Yeah, speaking of buying things, this is something I saw you talk about on Twitter a little bit too. It's a couple days old, but I do think we should talk about it because it was surprising. O'Shawn Mathis, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, transferred from TCU, defensive lineman. Gary Patterson is his former coach at TCU, who is now at Texas. When he hit the portal, most people kind of thought he was probably going to end up at Texas because his former coach is there. Texas has all the booster money. Everybody wants him. They need him. He's in need. And he ended up at Nebraska. Chose them earlier this week over Texas. So my question for you is, how the hell did Texas not get O'Shawn Mathis?
That's what I'm saying. So our Chris Hummer, who went to Texas, is very connected at Texas and throughout the whole state of Texas. And obviously we'll be on the show tomorrow when we do our transfer portal special, because he does all of our transfer portal work for 24/7 Sports. He basically said that Nebraska gave a better offer. Now Nebraska is very connected NIL wise, I believe, with Open Doors. So like Nebraska's got some money to play around with. They don't have his players in their own backyard, but they have cash. My thought here is, what do we talk about makes the Texas job so special? Geography and loads of money. If Texas doesn't have the money that their fans tell us they have, that job is not as attractive, because you do have to deal with all the BS and the distractions there in Austin. Like, you need to be able to spend some of your problems away like the Yankees used to do before they instituted the luxury tax in baseball. Like, if I'm Texas, you can tell me, and I think some of this is sour grapes from a lot of these fans on Twitter, that we didn't really want O'Shawn Mathis. He's not that great. You know what? Spend the money and find out if he's not that great on your roster. Like, spend if you're Texas, and get back on the fast track to the rebuild. We already recorded the summer school series. I don't think it's live yet for Texas, but I asked our expert Chip Brown. I was like, hey, are they gonna have to score 50 a game? He's like, they might have to. Like, I just think, man, like, if you're Sark, you're bummed about that, right? That your guys couldn't get that done. I know you spent a lot on yours. I know you had to, get Xavier Worthy. Obviously, Nair, the receiver that you got away from Tennessee after your transfer from Wyoming. But keep spending. I mean, it's easy to say spend somebody else's money, but you're Texas, right? Do you have it?
No, it was a surprise to me, but you're right. Like, Nebraska does have money, but I think, like you said, Texas fans saying that they didn't want him. I think Texas should spin this as, we are the first fiscally efficient NIL program, in that we had a price that we thought the player was worth, and the negotiating exceeded that price. So we decided to move on, and we wish him the best of luck, and we hope Nebraska the best of luck as well, our old friends. And we will move on and find the most financially efficient route possible to success. That's how I would spin it.
Nobody is rooting for the bottom line, but like that, well, there'll be some fan on Twitter will defend this. Yeah,
they'll be like, it's like the Rays do. Like, hey, we got all the value we could out of him here at that price. At this price, we don't think he's as valuable to us anymore, so we're moving him along, and we're going to keep winning games while paying less money. That's Texas. Texas is the Moneyball NIL program.
Yes, yeah. Do we have to go to break?
Yeah, we should. But speaking of that, like Nebraska, that's where Mathis went. We've got more news about Nebraska, which made me giggle, coming up after the break.
I need you to produce a Godfather.
We need hits.
Can one thing go right with this picture?
Cut it!
Scott Frost received an offer he wishes he could have refused from the NCAA. News earlier this week that Scott Frost, the head coach of Nebraska, has received a 1-year show cause penalty from the NCAA and a 5-day suspension from all coaching duties as part of the investigation in the program that began last year, which revolved around Nebraska having a few too many coaches on the staff than they were supposed to. Specifically, the violation involved former special teams analyst Jonathan Rutledge, who worked for Nebraska from the 2020 season, was fired in January 2021. This is what the NCAA said. He, quote, provided technical or tactical instruction to student athletes during practices and film sessions when he wasn't supposed to, blah, 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 a quote unquote significant breach of blah, blah, blah. I just think this is funny because the show
This
cause
is fake
really
news.
doesn't. Yeah.
How many bets did we lose last year on Nebraska because their special teams was literally dead last in the whole
terrible.
country?
It was terrible.
This is garbage. This is an NCAA conspiracy to hurt Nebraska. They're like, and at least NCAA do better, right? At least say it was an extra defensive assistant because their defense with Eric Chenander was actually good. Special teams, look at the game they lost to Michigan State. They outplayed Michigan State that whole game. Like plus 3, plus 2.5 was the right side. That was the nuts. And then the kid hits a 30-yard punt. Like it went more directionally incorrect with 55.5 yard, wide field. He hits it almost out of bounds to the wrong side where there's no coverage. You can't tell me that Nebraska had an extra special teams coaching at all.
I feel
either
like
that or that guy's committing fraud. Like the NCAA
like
should
a spy.
investigate.
He was sent in by Iowa to destroy Nebraska's special teams.
Oh my God.
Kirk Ferentz is playing chess. We're all playing checkers. I mean, yeah, no, I feel like Nebraska already suffered enough for Jonathan Rutledge's death. I'm not pinning it all on him, but I just think it is hilarious that they're in trouble for having too many special teams coaches when their special teams were awful. And maybe the NCAA should look at their special teams and say, you know what? We should let them have an extra coach or two in that area because they could really use it. But I think the biggest thing here is not the show cause, because Scott Frost is going to be at Nebraska for a year, fingers crossed. But depending on how things go, he's already on the hot seat. But I think the bigger thing for me is like the 5-day suspension, because he's not the only one. Like a couple other coaches have to serve 5-day suspensions, and like being away from it won't be a game, but still, even if it's like in preseason training camp, if it's during the week,
it is time specific.
Oh.
It's a 5-day. Have you seen this?
No.
All right, this is not a bit, y'all. It's during the championship portion of the season.
Oh,
so I think it only applies if Nebraska makes it to the championship game
or like a bowl game kind of deal.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, then that's not even that big of a deal to me, because like if you're in the conference championship game, which no offense, Nebraska, I don't think you're going to be in the conference championship game this year. I think that we should set our goals a little lower, 6-6, 7-5. Let's get to a bowl game. Let's get some momentum going into 2023. But I think that if you miss bowl practice is fine. It stinks. But there's also a very real chance that by the time that part of the year comes around, Scott Frost might not be the coach at Nebraska, because that's the bigger thing to me, is like he's already entering the year on the hot seat. And I don't think like the new Trev Alberts, the new athletic director there, is going to be like, well, I wasn't going to fire him before, but now that he's had this happen, he's got to go. Like, I don't think this is going to impact his tenure there as much as whether they win enough games or not. But it is still just like another thing that I feel like poor Scott Frost has to deal with while he's already got enough on his plate as it is. So we'll see how it goes. And if he does get fired, remember, other schools, you cannot hire him for probably at least 2 months afterwards. There's another story. It's not even a story. Like, we're done with all the news. I want to get to something I've seen, because we recapped the draft a bit on Monday. The NFL draft took place over the weekend. And once the NFL draft ends, that means it's time for everybody to start mock drafting the next year's NFL draft. And that means we've seen the flood from all the 2023 way too early mock drafts, including Ryan Wilson at CBSSports.com, the great Ryan Wilson. He released his, and Ryan was one of a number of early mock drafters to do something that just kind of had me rubbing my eyes like, what the hell am I looking at? Because every single year when it gets to these way too early mock drafts, there is always one player that the NFL draft guys include in these mocks that every single person who pays attention to college football is like, what the hell are you talking about? And this year, that player, a guy I have seen in the top 10, the top 5, sometimes as this second quarterback off the board in these way too early mocks, is Kentucky's Will Levis. Now, before we go, can I just go over some stats about Kentucky's Will Levis?
Please do.
All right, this is where Will Levis ranked overall among quarterbacks last year at the college level. Overall, passing efficiency, 46th. Completion percentage, 24th. Yards per attempt, 47th. Touchdown rate, 33rd. Interception rate, 115th. Touchdown to interception ratio, 76th. Sack rate, 65th. First down rate, 24th, not bad. But now let's go to air yards, throws of air yards 10 plus. So any throw that has to go 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. Efficiency, 50th. Completion rate, 27th. YPA, 33rd. So, not that bad down the field. Touchdown rate, 55th. Interception rate, 120th. Touchdown interception rate, 100th. Yeah, Will Levis. Like, are you taking him with the first or second pick?
Yeah, well, clearly the first. I gotta say, like, I'm looking at Ryan Wilson's mock draft. I'm looking at Blake Brockermeyer's mock draft, and I usually hate these early mock drafts, but I can go down typically and say, hey, I've seen these guys in person. I don't think these NFL writers have actually seen these dudes in person. And if you saw them in person, you just know that they don't actually have first round builds. Like they're just, okay, they're productive, but if you've seen them in person, you're just like you kind of know. You know what I mean? Like, you've been around these guys, you've been to the combine, like you know what a first rounder. Not a guy's guaranteed to go first round, but there's certain dudes I can guarantee you will not be going first round just based on how they're built. Will Levis, I think, is just a pure tools play because he was not very productive at Kentucky. However, I will point out a couple things here, and I cannot believe I'm defending Will Levis, but
Elliott, Will Levis defender, hates Stetson Bennett, loves Will Levis.
He did get there last summer, so he was not a guy who had a spring, and he was productive at times. If you can cut down on the just absolute WTF, I'm deciding I'm chucking this thing deep interceptions, and I think that was a lot of his stuff last year was, all right, it's play action, it's a deep over, I'm going to throw this ball whether Wandale is open or not. If you can cut that down, I don't know how good he is at actually reading a defense. A lot of that, I think they really did a great job of simplifying it for him. But he does have big size. He is fairly athletic, and he does have a really strong arm. So my guess here is people are looking at him, and they're seeing Josh Allen, which Josh Allen for the Bills is doing a great
Decent.
job.
He's doing okay.
Yeah.
I want to be clear. I'm not trying to say Will Levis sucks or Will Levis won't be drafted in the NFL or he won't go on or he won't improve or any of that stuff. He's perfectly capable of doing it all. But it's just to see him like as early as he's going in these first round mock drafts was just like no. That feels like it's this year's Malik Willis, where they spent a year telling themselves Malik Willis was going to be a first round pick. And then we saw what happened in the draft. And also, because I also remember, I go back a few years, I think it was Todd McShay in one of his early mocks had Minnesota quarterback Mitch Leidner.
Oh, yes. I was like, what?
And I was like, I think Mitch Leidner had thrown 15 passes the season before total. And I was like, really? Just like, is he going to be like the new Tebow? Somebody's going to fall in love with him and try him someplace. But yeah, no, I get it. But at the same time, I feel like we're all reaching a little too hard to find that first quarterback. But I also think it would be hilarious if Will Levis comes back 2022, has a tremendous season. It's like one of the first QBs taken off the board, and Penn State fans watch Sean Clifford for another year. So like Drew Allard doesn't play well enough to take the starting job. They're forced to deal with Clifford, who most of them just already are tired of. And then there's Will Levis going on to be a first round pick in the NFL draft. Like, Penn State fans would be in absolute hell. But speaking of that, like, nobody last year would have thought Kenny Pickett would have been a first round pick. And Kenny Pickett was the only quarterback taken in the first round of the year. So like Kenny Pickett was the Jag plus who became something more. So for the rest of the show, I want to discuss with you, Bud. We shared this. We want to go over Jag pluses, guys who are good college quarterbacks, guys like Will Levis, who nobody really looks at and says that's a first-round pick, who we think could have the kind of season that Kenny Pickett had last year. He just kind of blows up and plays himself into being a first-round pick. So I would love to hear some of the names you have on your list.
All right. I really don't think this can happen, but I guess Tanner Morgan would be like super
on
Jag
my list.
Plessy. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think he has NFL level talent, but I would not have put Kenny Pickett on this list last year. So I would have missed.
The return of Kirk Chiraka is going to bring back the Tanner Morgan that I had in my way too early mock draft a few years ago.
I did manually change my power ratings above what my number said by Minnesota removing Mike Sanford from the offense. And then I took that adjustment and I applied it negatively to Colorado when they hired Mike Sanford. I don't get that hire at all. Is Devin Leary too plussy to be in this?
That's what I considered him. I feel like Devin Leary is kind of too good. And I don't mean it that way. I mean, like, I feel like Devin Leary is something of an NFL prospect that most people are already kind of looking at as a possibility. Okay. So I would count him, but I think Devin Leary's more than a Jag plus.
And Armstrong is being mocked from the first round as well already. So that's probably a no for him.
Brendan Armstrong?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't see. Who's got him?
Brockermeyer had him.
Brockermeyer has
that
him?
one. I actually was very impressed with Brockermeyer and Wilson's mock drafts. There were only 3 guys in each that I just have seen in person that I was like, I really can't see that happening. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So like, I think those guys really did their research well. Okay, here's one for you. And producer Jordan put this in the private chat. Nobody's mocking Sam Hartman, but he does consistently put up like really good numbers.
Yeah, no, that's a good pick. And in that offense too, which is got a lot of it's simple for the quarterback, but it's also got a lot of the same kind of principles that you're seeing NFL teams kind of adopt. So I don't know if the transition is as great as it used to be a couple years ago, because I do think NFL teams are becoming more like college offenses in a lot of ways.
Cam Rising, did you have him?
I do. Yeah. Okay. I think I feel like I'm disrespecting him by including him as a Jag plus, but I do think that he's still technically a Jag plus. I just might be a little higher on him than most people to begin with. Who else do you have?
I'm just trying to go. Clearly there's somebody I should say here. That I know the whole chat's just waiting for me to say, and I'll
on my list. Come on, do it.
Fine,
do it.
Stetson Bennett.
There we go. Jeez. Stetson is going to come out. He's going to throw for 4,500 yards and 45 touchdowns, and he is going to be a first-round pick. And Kirby's going to win another national title, and he's going to do it with offense. And everybody's going to be like, holy crap, Kirby, how'd you do it? He's like, I just put the team in the hands of the mailman, Stetson Bennett, and he delivered, and here we are. A couple other names on my list. You mentioned quite a few of them, but I think Aiden O'Connell at Purdue.
Yeah.
Like, he's kind of very much similar to Pickett, and I think this is his 6th year, and I think that he's in a quarterback-friendly offense, and I think that maybe he, if things click right, he could have that kind of season. Somebody I already mentioned earlier, Sean Clifford could have a good year. I don't know if he's going to be a first-rounder, but if Kenny Pickett can do it, I don't think Sean Clifford, if you look at the career trajectory of the two of them, I don't think Sean Clifford's career at Penn State has been all that different to what Pickett's was the year before. So maybe year 2 under Mike Yurcich just kind of untapped something we haven't seen. Another quarterback, somebody who is a veteran player, who's a good college player, who has been in this offense for a few years and has improved little by little.
Wait, are you going to Starkville?
No.
Okay.
This guy has improved every single season, though. He's mobile. He's got an arm. DTR.
To me, it's a size thing.
Yeah.
He is smaller. I don't know what UCLA lists him at, but you're right, though. His production keeps increasing. It does concern me that UCLA pretty clearly tried to get somebody else to come in and start over him.
Yeah.
Like from a NFL draft perspective.
What about Phil Yurkovich?
Yeah, no, I think he's too known.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like Ryan has him in the first round already in his. And if he had stayed healthy, I don't know that he's actually back at DC right now. Like if Yurkovich had stayed healthy and kept playing like he was playing, would he have been the first pick, or not the first overall pick, but the first quarterback picked?
He might have been. I mean, he's got a lot of the stuff you want. If he'd done well at like the combine and tested well, yeah, he probably could have been.
All right, 2 SEC West guys. Or, well, one was in the SEC West. Bo Nix? Oregon is going to have a really good offensive line this year, I think.
I can't.
I know. It's
But you know what? For the sake, you said Stetson Bennett, so I will agree with Bo Nix. Right. We will overcome our biases and we will give them shots.
And maybe Will Rogers.
Yeah, I mean, he's gonna. The thing about Mike Leach QBs is even if it's kind of a, the system doesn't always translate well to the NFL level. Like you have to have an accurate arm. So that I think is one of the Kenny Pickett's bigger selling points was that, well, he didn't have the strongest arm. He was pretty accurate with the ball placement, and that was what appealed to a lot of teams about him. Although I think Pickett's a little more mobile, but for sure, I think another name that might be a real big surprise because he hasn't really been great at the college level yet. Like he was okay last year, but I have talked to some people who think that if things go right, this is a guy that definitely has all the traits that you're looking for. Can he put it together? Tanner McKee at Stanford.
Yep. Well, for people who don't know, so he was a 4 or 5 star kid back in, I think, the Fields Lawrence class, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Really big frame kid, big arm, not much talent around him at Stanford. LDS, so he did take the mission, came back. I could see that. NFL teams seem to love David Shaw, like they have him on the draft all the time. I could see that. The chat is popping with some interesting ones here, by the way. I look, guys, as somebody who invented Jag Plus, or at least was on the show when we invented it, AR-15 does not qualify for this. He's not somebody who we think is just like an okay college quarterback.
Yeah.
Like AR-15 has really high level talent. It's just, can he put it together, and will he put it together? Also, he's still an underclassman. So I tend to think of these guys as more the dudes that have been around for a while. Tanner Mordecai is a good one, by the way. You put on
decent shout out, yeah.
From obviously Gabriel at OU. Do you think? I think he's very well known, but nobody's mocking him first round. Can he throw more routes?
That's the question. I think he's going to have to show a little more well-roundedness to his approach in the Oklahoma offense this year. I mean, I think he's somebody a team's going to take a shot on. Yeah. I just don't know if he's ever going to be a first-round pick.
Danny does think he throws an NFL ball. Like, remember when Danny saw him throw in person? And like, I obviously won't trust Danny Cannell on that because he played in the NFL for a long time.
Yeah, I don't think, like, when I've seen Gabriel, and it's hard always to kind of tell from television, I don't think he's got like a ton of zip on his deep ball, but he's incredibly accurate with his deep ball. Yeah. Like, he knows where to put it. He's always like putting it, whether it's to the outside of the receiver's shoulders or the inside, he's got very good placement, and he's able to throw receivers open in a lot of the times with deep balls, which I think is a very important trait. It's just at the NFL, I don't know if he's got enough zip on it where a safety at the NFL level won't just come running over there and be like, pluck, I'll take that from you.
Right.
So
here's a question for you. And it kind of pivots off Gabriel, because Gabriel's been in this offense, and Tennessee is running the same offense. Hendon Hooker had a 31-3 touchdown interception ratio, and I think he had over a 50% success rate running the ball as well.
Mm-hmm.
He's a bigger dude, or big enough. Now, this is just where it gets hard to separate. How much of this is that offense, which is essentially a cheat code in college football because of the way it uses spacing and tempo and the linemen downfield, and it's really hard to stop unless you just got Georgia level athletes. And how much of that is actually Hooker? I don't have all the answers there. Like I have a hard time knowing exactly how much that is Hooker and how much of that is the offense. We have not seen guys from that offense go to the NFL and have success, though, right? Like we've seen some air raid guys, but nobody from that Baylor system has gone on to the NFL and done anything, right?
Not that I could really think of. I mean, RG3 was the biggest hope of all those guys that were taken, but maybe it would have been him if it hadn't been for injuries. But I think that a lot of the guys that have come since have just kind of been, because a lot of the time when you see in those, there's not really rocket armed QBs that are being put into those offenses. Like, a lot of the times those programs over the years, and maybe that's going to change as the offense probably becomes more prevalent, but it was a lot of the times we're taking these kind of rated 3-star dudes and who have these traits that we're looking for that can at least play in this and putting them in. So it was like when it came to the NFL, it was like, don't really have the arm, don't really have the processing that we want, blah, blah, blah. So not yet, not to say that it can't happen. Maybe Hendon Hooker is the guy who breaks through. Maybe Dylan Gabriel's the guy who breaks through. It's just, I think that it's kind of hard to bet on that. But I do think Hendon Hooker is a good call as somebody who could be that guy. Another guy who could be that guy, I saw it in the comments. Great point. Mark Whipple did it with Kenny Pickett at Pitt. Maybe Mark Whipple does it with Casey Thompson at Nebraska, or whoever wins the Nebraska job.
That's certainly possible. Are we sure Casey Thompson is Jag Plus yet?
He's definitely, he was a Jag Plus in that. He was more than a Jag Plus in that bowl game against Colorado. But
yeah,
Colorado, that game was not exactly full strength, kind of a really tough test. I think that's a pretty good place to end the day's show, though. Thank you for tuning in live if you have. And again, if you haven't, hit the like button on the video. I mean, for the love of God, we just gave you a free hour's worth of entertainment there. You could at least just hit one little click, subscribe to the show, subscribe to us on all your podcast platforms. And that way, when the next show comes up, whether it's on YouTube or on your phone, on the podcasts, you'll get the notifications. You'll know it's up. You'll tune it in. You'll get the goodness. You'll get the information. You'll get all the college football talk you want. And I promise it's not all going to be NIL. Not all. For a little while, probably going to be a lot of NIL. So, live with it. Anyways, thank you, Bud, for listening. Or for listening.
Talk about listening any day, man. No doubt.
Thank you, Bud, for joining us today. And we will see the rest of you guys next time. Thank you.
Free chip.
Free chip.